NBA free agency is quickly approaching. Let's talk landing spots for the league's top free agents. Zach, what's the best fit for Klay?
In my romantic basketball soul, it's always going to be the Golden State Warriors. But if not, if the feelings are too bad and he's got to leave, the great thing about shooting is he could fit anywhere. He could fit in Denver if KCP leaves. I don't know if they have the money. He could fit in Oklahoma City. He could fit in Orlando if he wants to go to a young team. Shooting.
I absolutely love it. Denver for Klay Thompson. The number of opportunities he's going to get off the best two-man game in basketball. You kidding me? It would fit in perfectly.
I just don't think they got the money.
The impact would be there on a team that can contend. I would love to see that, but part of me also would love to see him finish his career in Golden State.
Austin, what do you think is a good spot for OG Anunoby?
Back with the Knicks. Listen, if it's not broke, don't fix it. They were 20-3 when he was in the lineup. 20-3. That is not a record that you can just blow by. I mean, when he was in the lineup, they were highly effective. He's a Swiss Army knife, capable shooter, defender, rebounder, can guard multiple positions. He's a guy that obviously doesn't need the ball in his hands, as Julius and Jalen like to have the ball in their hands so he can play off of them. I think he's a great fit for the Knicks.
There's been a lot of talk about the Knicks getting another star. I think the Knicks, as presently constituted with the Anunoby, if they were healthy with Randall Bogdanovich, could have pushed the Celtics pretty hard in the playoffs. As is, the Knicks' problem is Philly's sitting there with all that cap
pay that money
and a need at his position, and we traded Emmanuel quickly and R.J. Barrett. Oh boy!
Hey, you know, sometimes the best way to beat a team is take a player that they really need, and OG Anunoby would be one of those players. How about Paul George, Alex?
It's Philly. And look, I said earlier, it's an oversimplification to say that this is the difference, right? He puts them over the top to win a title because I think Joel Embiid's health is a big part of that at the end of the season. But the bottom line is this: he addresses a serious need for this team. This is one of the worst teams in the league in catch and shoot threes. Paul George does that at a really high level, did it at a high level again last year. Major upgrade offensively from what they had at that spot in Tobias Harris. Paul George gives them a lot. Question is, would he deliver in the postseason, and would Joel Embiid be healthy?
In my very simple basketball mind, it's not going to be hard to upgrade over Tobias Harris and what he did last year. Paul George could be the first domino to fall, and the most important domino to fall this weekend. Brian Windhorst laid out the options for PG-13. Take a listen.
Paul George has three options. One is to re-sign with the Clippers. Two is to enter free agency and go somewhere else like Philly or Orlando. Three, he can opt into his contract and get traded by this weekend. That is something that is going to come to a head in the next day or two if he wants to go with that option. So the Paul George sweepstakes is going to come to a head, at least that aspect of it, faster than those other players who are going to be free agents like Klay Thompson or DeMar DeRozan.
I mean, when you look at Paul George, it seems that everyone's trying to figure out exactly where he'll be. And we kind of talked about the best fit. But if you could pick one place for him to go outside of the Clippers, where would that be?
First of all, this is the single biggest story in the NBA going on right now, and it's the biggest domino that's going to fall, and I think it's going to fall fast. Wendy mentioned the possibility of him opting in and getting traded like Chris Paul did to get to the Rockets all those years ago. That widens the field beyond the Philadelphia 76ers, who have all that cap space and his legs outlined, a perfect role for him. That widens the field to any number of winning teams that can trade out stuff to get him. The problem is it's hard to make a winning team trade. If Paul George is going to want to go to a place where he can contend for a title immediately, the Clippers are going to want players that will help them contend for a title immediately. That's a tough needle to thread. One other dynamic here we haven't talked about, right? The elephant in the room. It's not the easiest place in the world to play, Philadelphia, okay? So when you talk about a fan base that is, this rabid and this hungry for a championship, it's been over 40 years, and it's a proud basketball city. They love that franchise. But I've been in that city a long time. I've been in that building too many times to see the anxiety of the fan base transferred onto the court in big spots. So if you're Paul George coming in and you're viewed as some sort of a savior, right? And now you get into the postseason, and that anxiety is going to kick in. That's something for him to weigh. Because I think that could be one of the toughest places in the league to play for a home player. Now, I'll say this. If you can prove that you're going to play hard every night and you're not affected by the pressure, they'll take a bad shooting night. They won't take if you look afraid. That's when you have a hard time in the city of Philadelphia. So you can also become an icon
So, but that's what you have to weigh and understand the pressure that you are going to be under coming in as a guy that's expected to get this thing across the finish line.
Okay, let's say Philly's out of it because it is a hard place to play. We saw it with Ben Simmons. We saw it with James Harden as well, Austin. What would be some spots outside of Philly that Paul George should take a look at?
I like Orlando.
You would?
We talk about, listen, if we're talking about championship contention, I don't know if that's the team I would say, but we look at some of these young up-and-coming teams, players, teams that he can have an impact. They got, Paolo, who's a guy who I think people don't talk about enough. Franz is a very talented player. Suggs is a really capable defender. They got a lot of pieces down there. I mean, Philly's the team that makes the most sense. If we're talking about he wants to win a ring right now, it's Philly. They have all the pieces there. Him, Maxey, and Embiid, to your point, with the pressure, it wouldn't be so much on Paul. The best player still would be Joel Embiid. That's the best player in the team.
Yeah.
And then you have a young closer in Maxey who was unbelievable this past playoff. So you pair them up with those two, you immediately put them in championship contention, especially in the East where right now it's very top-heavy. We have questions with Milwaukee. We don't know which way they're going to go or how they're going to look next year. We know Boston's going to be good. We know New York's going to be good. Outside of that, Miami and Milwaukee are questionable. You put him on Philly, man, they're right in there in that conversation.
Zach, from a roster standpoint, does Philly need a third star like Paul George?
I don't know if they need a third star, but they need to use that cap space to either get a third star or 2 or 3 players who fit with Tyrese Maxey.
Is that the only way to compete with Boston, though?
Well, first of all, Philly doesn't even have a team right now. They essentially have 2 guys on their team, and I do think at some point we need to talk about, you mentioned Ben Simmons, James Harden. They turn over this roster around Joel Embiid so dramatically every single season, and I think that lack of continuity has hurt them. Bring back their entire team. But this Paul George thing is the first domino. He mentioned Orlando. I'm just saying, if he opts in, Orlando's a cap space team. Sixers are a cap space team. He can just walk there. If he opts in and they work with him on a trade, the universe of possibilities opens up because this dude, with his 3 and D off-ball skill set, can fit with anybody.
So my question is this: are we sort of overrating the Philadelphia Eagles? Because when you listen to Zach say they haven't gotten out of the second round, are we fantasizing about this team a little bit, saying that if Paul George goes there, he makes them title contenders?
I think we always look at every one of these teams at their ceiling, and the fact of the matter is they've got the most dominant scoring force in the NBA in Joel Embiid. There's no matchup for him. There's no scheme, no personnel. When he's healthy. Right. When he's healthy, this is the most dominant scoring force in the NBA, and they have an emerging star in Tyrese Maxey. So you always look at these teams at their ceiling. What this really is in the Eastern Conference, it's the Boston Celtics, and then there's a pot of teams trying to grab that second rung in the ladder.
So this makes them that second team? You believe if they get Paul George, though?
You have to put them in that category as saying you're not going to be surprised if they ended up in the conference finals against the Boston Celtics if they had Paul George.
I got to see the rest of the roster, and I got to see what the Knicks do, because I think the Knicks are a tough, nasty team if they bring back some of their key guys.
I think it's just difficult, Austin. Do you think this is the piece and they beat the Celtics?
I don't know if they beat the Celtics. They'd definitely be able to compete. And I think in terms of Joel's health postseason, it would really help if they did have another player like Paul George that they could rely on every night. The usage rate for Joel Embiid is so high. He touches the ball every single time down the floor. The load on his shoulders every night to perform, dynamic, just so their team has a chance to win. I think plays into his health postseason. He's a big guy, so I think Paul George would help with those things.
I mean, he has a lot on his shoulders.